All right. So have you ever wondered what it's like to be in the middle of like a really intense family feud?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Or, you ever have those moments in life that feel kind of like divinely guided?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like fate's just stepping in.
Totally. And then sometimes there are these jaw-dropping twists of fate.
Yeah, life can just take those unexpected turns.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So if any of that sounds intriguing, well, you are in the right place.
you come to the right spot for sure.
Because today we are going deep into a series of pivotal events in the life of Jacob.
Oh, yeah, a name that carries a lot of weight.
Oh, yeah, tons of weight. And we're going to be looking specifically at Genesis chapters 31 through 35.
Okay, a significant chunk of his story.
Yeah, so think of this as like your express route.
Right, a crash course.
Yeah, to understanding a really transformative period in his life.
So we're talking about personal struggles, divine commands.
Yeah, and family drama that you would not believe.
So like a reality show from ancient times?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission on this deep dive
Right, let's lay it out.
to unpack Jacob's dramatic departure from his father-in-law Laban.
Okay, so family tension's already right there.
Or, yeah, huge time. And then his incredibly anxiety-ridden reunion with his brother Esau.
Oh, wow, so there's that brotherly rivalry dynamic.
Yeah, that's right. And then finally, his journey back to the land that was promised to his ancestors.
All right, so a journey full of challenges and I'm guessing some triumphs too.
Oh, absolutely. So, learner, if you're out there, get comfortable.
Yeah, settle in.
Because we are about to explore the key moments in this incredible story.
Unpacking it all.
Yeah, and what they might mean. So let's get started.
Okay, let's dive in.
One of the things that I find so fascinating about this section is how right at the beginning of chapter 31,
Okay, setting the stage.
yeah, you can feel this shift in Laban's attitude towards Jacob.
Interesting, like something's off.
Yeah, so we hear that Laban's sons are starting to get really jealous.
Okay, understandable sibling rivalry.
Yeah, over all of the success that Jacob has had.
Yeah, I mean, if it seems like someone's getting ahead at your expense.
Yeah, and they're suggesting that he's basically gotten all this wealth at their father's expense.
Okay, so they're seeing it as a zero-sum game.
Yeah, and the text even says that Jacob himself noticed that Laban just wasn't towards him as he had been before.
Ah, so even Jacob himself senses that change.
Yeah, so you can really feel this tension building, like what from the start.
Absolutely, it's palpable.
And then right on cue, the Lord gives Jacob this direct instruction.
Oh, wow. Okay, so divine intervention stepping in.
Yeah, he says, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you.
Okay, a very clear directive.
Yeah, so it's not just like Jacob waking up one morning and deciding like, oh, I think I'll move back home.
Right, it's not just a whim.
It's presented as this divinely inspired command.
Okay, a mission from a higher power.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how Jacob then acts on this.
Yeah, what does he do with this instruction?
So he doesn't just like sneak off in the middle of the night.
Right, not a runaway situation.
No, he goes and has this crucial conversation with Rachel and Leah out in the fields.
Okay, interesting. So away from Laban's earshot.
Exactly, and he basically lays it all out.
Like a family meeting.
Yeah, he's like, look, this is what's been going on. Laban has not been fair. He's changed my wages like 10 times.
Wow, 10 times. That's a lot of wage changes.
But he also acknowledges that God did not allow Laban to hurt him.
Okay, so there's this awareness of a protective force as well.
Yeah, and I think it really makes you think about like the power dynamics at play in their family.
Right, like who holds the power, who's controlling the resources.
Exactly, and I think that their response, Rachel and Leah's response, is really telling.
Okay, so what do they say?
So they say, is there even anything left for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers to him?
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
He's basically sold us, they say, and he's taken all of our money.
So they're feeling used and discarded
Yeah, they're clearly feeling very alienated from their father.
and seeing themselves as victims of his manipulations.
Yeah, and it's like they're viewing Jacob's success, which, remember, is being divinely blessed,
Right, God's favor is on Jacob.
as something that should rightfully belong to them and to their children.
Interesting, so they're seeing it as their due as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it adds this really human element to the story, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Because you have the divine command, but then you also have these very real family dynamics and personal experiences.
Totally. And they've seen their father's behavior firsthand.
Right, they've been on the receiving end of his manipulations.
And, Jacob even tells them about this vivid dream that he had where he saw all the rams breeding.
Oh, interesting, a prophetic dream.
Yeah, and they were breeding in a way that favored his flocks, like they were ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled.
Wow, specific markings.
And then an angel appears and confirms that this is divine intervention.
Oh, wow. So God's directly involved in the breeding of the flocks.
Yeah, and it's specifically addressing Laban's unfair treatment.
So it's not just a random event. It's tied to this conflict.
Yeah, and then you have this really interesting part where Rachel decides to take her father's images.
Ooh, okay. The plot thickens. Now we're getting into some intrigue.
So we don't know for sure what these images were.
Yeah, a bit of a mystery there.
But they were probably some sort of household idols, maybe connected to family lineage or protection.
Okay, so something of religious or cultural significance.
Yeah, and the fact that she steals them becomes a really big deal later on.
Yeah, I can imagine that'll come back into play.
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah.
So while all of this is going on, Jacob plans a very strategic exit.
Okay, so he's not just walking out the front door.
No, he's like stealth mode.
A covert operation.
The text says he stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian and that he didn't even tell him that he was fleeing.
Wow, so a very deliberate escape.
Yeah, he's not just leaving, he's making a clean break
Severing ties.
so that Laban can't try to stop him.
Right, no chance for objections.
But as you can imagine, word gets out.
Yeah, news travels fast, even in ancient times.
A few days later, Laban finds out that Jacob's gone and he is not happy about it.
I bet he wasn't thrilled.
So he gathers up his relatives and they chase after Jacob for 7 days.
Wow, a week-long pursuit. That's determination.
Oh yeah, they eventually catch up to him in the mountains of Gilead.
Okay, so dramatic confrontation brewing.
And this is where we see another example of what's presented as divine intervention.
Oh, wow. Okay, so God's stepping in again.
Yeah, God appears to Laban in a dream and basically says, "Don't you dare say anything to Jacob, either good or bad."
Wow, a very direct warning.
Yeah, so God's setting some serious boundaries here.
Protecting Jacob.
Yeah, but Laban still confronts Jacob.
Right. He's not going to just let it go.
And he starts accusing him of all kinds of things.
Okay, like what?
He's like, "Why did you sneak away? Why didn't you let us throw you a proper going away party?"
Oh, so a breach of social customs.
Yeah, with like mirth and songs and tambourines and harps.
Right, a festive send-off.
And then he asks the big question, "Wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?"
Ooh. Okay, so now the stolen idols come into play.
Yeah, and Jacob's response is really interesting.
Yeah, how does he react?
He basically says that he was afraid that Laban would take his daughters and grandkids away from him by force.
Okay, so he felt threatened.
Yeah, and as for the gods, he says, "With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live."
Wow, a strong statement.
Yeah, but the thing is, he has no idea that Rachel's the one who took them.
Oh, so he's making a declaration without knowing the full picture.
Yeah, and so this sets the stage for Rachel to do some quick thinking.
Yeah, she's got to think on her feet.
So when Laban's searching all their tents, Rachel hides the images in the camel's saddle.
Wow, a clever hiding spot.
Yeah, and then when Laban gets to her, she says, "Oh, I can't get up right now. The custom of women is upon me."
Ooh, a convenient excuse.
Yeah, it was a culturally acceptable way to avoid being searched.
And it plays on Laban's assumptions.
Exactly, so he doesn't find the idols.
She successfully deflects him.
And then Jacob launches into this huge defense of all the work he's done for Laban over the years.
Okay, so he's laying out his case.
Yeah, he's like, "Look, I've been here for 20 years. I've taken care of your flocks.
Right, years of service.
I've endured hardship after hardship."
Like what kind of hardships?
He even says, "That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it."
Wow, so taking on the responsibility for any losses.
And he talks about how he suffered through the drought in the day and the frost by night.
So bearing the brunt of the elements.
He's like, "I haven't even slept properly in all these years."
He's painting a picture of tireless dedication.
Yeah, and then he reminds Laban of how he worked 14 years for his daughters and 6 years for his livestock.
So a very specific accounting of his labor.
And that Laban changed his wages 10 times.
Right back to that point of unfair treatment.
He's basically saying, "If it weren't for my father's God, you would have sent me away with absolutely nothing."
So he's highlighting God's role in his success.
And he even reminds Laban that God literally just reprimanded him in a dream.
Don't forget about that little divine intervention.
Exactly. And Laban's response is really interesting.
Okay, how does he respond to all this?
He's like, "Okay, yeah, the daughters are yours and the kids are yours and the flocks are yours." But he doesn't really deny any of the things that Jacob's accusing him of.
So a tacit admission of guilt, perhaps.
Yeah, so instead he says, "Let's make a covenant."
Okay, so trying to smooth things over.
Yeah, so they build this big pile of stones and a pillar.
A physical marker of their agreement.
Laban calls the place Jagar Sahadutha, which is Aramaic.
Okay, and what does that mean?
It basically means heap of witness. And then Jacob calls it Gilead, which is Hebrew, and it means the same thing.
Interesting. Both languages representing the same idea of a witness.
Yeah, and then they name another spot Mizpah.
Mizpah, okay, I've heard that name before.
Yeah, and Laban says, "The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another."
Wow. So a pledge of non-aggression with God as the ultimate witness.
Yeah, so this is basically their way of drawing a line in the sand.
Right, a clear boundary,
And agreeing to not mess with each other.
a truce.
Yeah.
You know, it makes you think about how important these physical markers were back then.
Oh, totally. Like a handshake, but way more permanent.
Yeah, exactly. Something tangible to represent their agreement.
So then they have a meal together at the heap.
Okay, a shared meal to seal the deal.
Yeah, and then Laban finally goes home.
Good riddance, I guess.
Yeah. So Jacob's managed to get away from Laban, but now he's headed straight for another potentially explosive encounter.
Oh boy. Here we go again, more family drama.
This time with his brother Esau.
Yeah, that estranged brother he hasn't seen in a long time.
So chapter 32 starts with Jacob continuing on his journey, and he comes across this group of angels
Ooh, angels. That's always interesting.
at a place that he names Mahanaim.
Mahanaim. Okay, I'm not familiar with that place.
It means two hosts or two camps.
Interesting. Could that be symbolic somehow?
Maybe so, but it seems like this encounter with the angels is supposed to give him some reassurance before he meets Esau.
Okay, a little divine pep talk.
Yeah, but even with that, Jacob is understandably still really nervous.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be nervous about meeting your brother after all this time and after everything that happened?
So he sends messengers ahead to Esau.
No, diplomatic envoy.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he addresses Esau. He calls him my lord.
Showing deference.
Yeah, and he refers to himself as your servant.
So really emphasizing his subordinate position.
And he makes sure to mention all the wealth he's accumulated.
Okay, so maybe a little bragging mixed in with the humility.
Well, he lists off his oxen and asses and flocks and men servants and women servants.
A subtle reminder of his success.
You know, maybe hoping to appease Esau a little bit.
Maybe trying to impress him too.
Yeah, but the news that comes back is not good.
Oh, what do they say?
The messengers tell him that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men.
Oh, wow. That's not a welcoming party.
So Jacob is understandably terrified.
Yeah, I'd be freaked out too.
The text says he was greatly afraid and distressed.
Rightfully so.
So what does he do? He comes up with a plan.
Okay, a man of action.
He divides his whole group into two separate camps.
Okay, so a strategic maneuver.
His logic is that if one group gets attacked, the other one might be able to escape.
Right, a bit of a desperate measure.
Yeah, it shows just how scared he was.
Yeah, he's really fearing the worst.
And then he prays this incredibly heartfelt prayer to God.
Oh, wow, pouring his heart out.
He calls upon the God of his fathers, Abraham and Isaac.
Invoking the lineage.
Yeah, and he reminds God of the promise to bring him back to his land and to deal well with him.
Yeah, holding God to his word.
And then he says, God, I'm not worthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you've shown me.
A moment of humility.
Yeah, he remembers how he crossed the Jordan with just his staff, and now he's got two whole companies.
So acknowledging God's blessings.
And then he gets to the heart of it. He pleads with God to deliver him from Esau's hand.
Yeah, he's basically saying, God, please save me.
It's this really raw moment of vulnerability.
Yeah, you can feel the fear and desperation.
And after that, he does something really practical.
Okay, so from prayer to action.
He comes up with this very elaborate plan to try and pacify Esau.
Okay, what does he do?
He puts together this huge gift of livestock.
Like a peace offering.
Yeah, and it's super specific. He sends 200 she-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals.
Wow, that's a lot of animals.
Yeah, it shows how valuable livestock was to them.
And the sheer size of the gift emphasizes the sincerity of his intentions.
Exactly. And he divides them all into separate droves.
Okay, why does he do that?
So he tells his servants to make sure they tell Esau that these are a present from my lord Esau from thy servant Jacob.
So reinforcing that message of submission.
And he says he's following right behind,
Okay, so strategically timing the arrival of the gifts.
hoping to soften Esau up before they meet face to face.
Yeah, like softening the blow. And
Yeah.
then what happens?
Well, that night under the cover of darkness,
Oh, okay, so a clandestine operation.
he has all his wives, his servants, and his 11 sons cross the Jabbok River.
Okay, so moving his family to safety.
And he sends all of his possessions across, too.
So he's not taking any chances.
Basically putting everything he cares about on the other side of the river before he goes to meet Esau.
Yeah, a strategic retreat.
And then he's left alone.
Oh man, alone to face his fears.
And this is where things get really weird.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He wrestles with a man all night long until daybreak.
Wait a minute, he wrestles with someone?
Yeah, and we don't know exactly who this man is.
A mysterious figure.
Yeah, some people think it's a divine being, an angel, or maybe even God himself.
Wow, so a supernatural wrestling match.
And it's not like a normal wrestling match either.
Right, like what happens?
So the man can't overpower Jacob, but he touches the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and it gets dislocated.
Ouch, that sounds painful.
Yeah, and even with a dislocated hip, Jacob refuses to let go until he gets a blessing.
Wow, that's determination.
He says, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me."
He's not giving up.
And during this struggle, the man changes Jacob's name to Israel.
Ooh, a name change, that's significant.
Yeah, he says, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed."
Wow, so a new name reflecting his struggle and his victory.
And the name Israel means he who strives with God.
So it encapsulates this whole experience.
Yeah, and Jacob names the place Peniel.
Peniel, okay, another new place name.
He says, "For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved."
So a place marked by a divine encounter.
And because of that wrestling match, he limps for the rest of his life.
Yeah, a permanent reminder of that night.
And that's where the tradition comes from of not eating the sinew of the thigh.
Oh, interesting. A ritual observance tied to this event.
Yeah, because that's the part of Jacob's thigh that the man touched.
Okay, so a physical reminder embedded in religious practice.
So finally, after all that, Jacob meets up with Esau.
Okay, the moment of truth.
And remember, he was so afraid.
Right, expecting the worst.
But the actual encounter is like incredibly emotional.
Really? So how does it go down?
So Jacob approaches Esau and he bows down to the ground 7 times.
Wow, a gesture of deep respect and humility.
And Esau's reaction is totally unexpected.
Okay, this is where I'm on the edge of my seat.
He doesn't come at him with anger or with his 400 men.
No vengeful army.
Instead, he runs to meet Jacob and hugs him and falls on his neck and kisses him.
Wow, a complete turnaround.
And they both start crying.
Oh man, that's beautiful.
It's this really powerful image of reconciliation after all these years of separation.
Yeah, and after all that fear Jacob had.
Yeah, it seems like maybe Esau had let go of all that anger.
Maybe time healed some wounds or something more profound happened.
Yeah, and then Esau sees Jacob's family and asks about them.
Okay, so acknowledging the whole family?
And then they talk about the gifts that Jacob sent ahead.
Right, those elaborate livestock gifts?
At first, Esau's like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I've got enough."
So he's not lacking in resources himself.
But Jacob insists that he takes them.
Okay, why is that so important to him?
He says to Esau, "For therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me."
Wow, so seeing Esau's acceptance is like seeing the face of God.
It shows just how relieved and joyful Jacob is that Esau's not trying to hurt him.
Yeah, like a huge weight has been lifted.
And then they talk about how they're going to travel.
Okay, so figuring out the logistics.
Esau offers to travel alongside Jacob, but Jacob's like, "I've got all these kids and young animals. It's going to be slow going."
Right, a big caravan moves slowly.
So he suggests that Esau go ahead to Seir and he'll follow at his own pace.
So a wise and practical decision.
Yeah, Esau even offers to leave some of his men behind to protect Jacob, but Jacob's like, "No, I'm good."
He's feeling confident enough to decline the offer.
So Esau goes back home to Seir, and Jacob continues on to Succoth,
Okay, another new place.
where he builds a house for himself and booths for his cattle.
A home base for his family and his flocks.
Yeah, and then he moves on to Shalem, which is near Shechem, and there he buys some land and builds an altar.
Okay, so settling down and establishing a place of worship.
He calls the altar Elelo Israel.
Elohistral, what does that mean?
It means God, the God of Israel.
So a clear declaration of his faith and his allegiance to God.
Yeah, and then chapter 34 takes a really dark turn.
Uh-oh, shift in tone.
We hear about this awful event that happens to Jacob's daughter Dinah.
Oh no, what happened?
So Dinah goes out to visit the daughters of the land,
Okay, so she's interacting with the local women.
and she's violated by this man named Shechem.
Violated, what does that mean?
He rapes her.
Oh no, that's
And,
horrible.
yeah, it's a terrible act. And Shechem is the son of Hamor the Hivite.
Okay, so a prominent figure in the community.
Yeah, and despite what he's done, Shechem falls in love with Dinah.
That's twisted.
Yeah, and wants to marry her.
Oh wow, so trying to right his wrong through marriage.
Yeah, and his father Hamor approaches Jacob and suggests that they intermarry and live together.
Okay, so a proposal of peace and alliance.
Yeah, he's like, "Let's give our daughters to each other's sons and we can all live together in this land."
A strategic move to unite the two groups.
Yeah, but Jacob's sons are furious.
Right. I mean, and understandably so.
Especially Simeon and Levi, who are Dinah's full brothers.
Yeah, they're protective of their sister.
So they come up with this plan for revenge.
Okay, here we go again. Another revenge plot.
They tell Shechem and Hamor that they can't agree to the marriage unless all the men in their city get circumcised.
Okay, so using a religious ritual as a bargaining chip.
Yeah. And circumcision was a huge deal for Jacob's family.
Right, a sign of the covenant with God.
So Shechem and Hamor are so eager to make this happen that they convince all the men in their city to do it.
Wow, so they put a lot of faith in this agreement.
Yeah, but then 3 days later, when all the men are still recovering from the circumcision,
Oh man, that's got to be a vulnerable time.
Simeon and Levi take their swords and attack the city.
Oh no, a brutal act of vengeance.
They kill all the men, including Shechem and Hamor,
So a massacre.
and they rescue Dinah.
So they accomplished their mission, but at a horrific cost,
And then they loot the city.
taking everything they can.
And Jacob is horrified.
Yeah, I can only imagine his reaction.
He's like, "What have you done? You've made us vulnerable to all the other people living in this land."
Right, they've created a lot of enemies.
He's worried that the Canaanites and the Perizzites will come and wipe them out.
So a strategic concern for the survival of his family.
But Simeon and Levi are like, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?
So they're justifying their actions as a matter of honor.
Yeah, and it leaves Jacob in a really tough spot.
Yeah, caught between his son's actions and the potential consequences.
And then God speaks to Jacob again.
Okay, so back to divine guidance.
This is in chapter 35, and God tells him to go up to Bethel.
Bethel, the place where he had that encounter with God before.
Yeah, and to build an altar there.
Okay, a return to a significant location.
And Jacob tells his whole household to get rid of any foreign gods they have.
So a spiritual cleansing,
Yeah, and to purify themselves and change their clothes.
preparing for a sacred encounter.
And they all give Jacob their idols and earrings, and he buries them under an oak tree near Shechem.
So a symbolic break from those foreign influences.
And as they're traveling to Bethel, the text says that the terror of God was upon the cities that were around them.
Wow. So divine protection.
Yeah, so nobody comes after them to take revenge for what Simeon and Levi did.
So they arrive at Bethel safe and sound.
And when they get there, Jacob builds an altar and calls it El Bethel.
El Bethel meaning God of the house of God.
Yeah, remembering how God appeared to him there when he was running away from Esau.
A reminder of past encounters with God.
And then Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, dies.
Oh, a sad moment.
Yeah, they bury her under an oak tree and call it Elon Bachaf, which means oak of weeping.
So a place of mourning.
And then God appears to Jacob again at Bethel.
Another divine visitation.
He reminds him that his name is now Israel and confirms the promises that he made to him.
Okay, what promises?
That he'll have many descendants, that nations and kings will come from his line, and that he'll inherit the land that was promised to Abraham and Isaac.
So reaffirming the covenant and the future of his descendants.
Yeah, and Jacob sets up a pillar of stone where God spoke to him and pours a drink offering and oil on it.
An act of worship and dedication.
And he renames the place Bethel again.
Reinforcing the significance of that place.
And then they leave Bethel, and as they're traveling towards Ephrath, Rachel goes into labor.
Oh, okay, a new baby on the way.
But the labor is really difficult.
Complications.
Yeah, and as she's dying, she names the baby Benoni, which means son of my sorrow.
Oh, wow. A name reflecting her pain and grief.
But Jacob changes his name to Benjamin.
Okay, a more hopeful name.
It can mean son of the right hand or son of my strength.
So a focus on strength despite the loss.
They bury Rachel by the side of the road near Ephrath, which is also known as Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, a place that will become very important later on.
Yeah, and Jacob sets up a pillar on her grave.
A marker of remembrance and love.
And then they keep traveling, and we hear about this really messed up incident with Reuben.
Okay, what does he do?
He sleeps with Bilhah, who's one of Jacob's concubines.
Oh, wow. A violation within the family.
Yeah, the text says that Israel heard about it, but we don't know what he did about it.
So a potential source of future conflict.
And then chapter 35 ends with a list of all 12 of Jacob's sons.
Okay, the 12 tribes of Israel are taking shape.
And finally, Jacob arrives at his father Isaac's house in Mamre.
So a family reunion.
And Isaac dies peacefully at 180 years old.
Wow, a long life.
Yeah, and both Esau and Jacob bury him.
So a final act of unity between the brothers.
So, learner, that was a whirlwind tour through a really transformative period in Jacob's life.
We covered a lot of ground.
We saw moments that are presented as divine intervention. We saw family drama at its finest,
Jealousy, betrayal, reconciliation.
unexpected acts of forgiveness, and moments of profound loss.
Yeah, a roller coaster of emotions.
And I think what really stands out is the way that human choices and divine actions are constantly interacting.
Right. Like it's not one or the other, it's
Mhm.
both.
Yeah, you see Jacob's strategic thinking is sometimes manipulative behavior,
But also his genuine faith and his struggles.
and the intense emotions of his family members.
Yeah, their jealousy, their anger, their desire for revenge.
But through it all, God is there, guiding his path, fulfilling his promises.
It's a reminder that even when we mess up, God can still work through us.
And I think one of the most powerful moments is that unexpected embrace between Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, after all that buildup and fear, it's such a relief to see them reconcile.
And then there's the name change to Israel, which signifies this whole new level of relationship with God.
It's a transformation of identity.
Yeah, and we see this contrast between deceit and covenant.
Right, like on the one hand, you have Laban trying to trick Jacob, and then Jacob's sons deceiving Shechem and his people.
But then you have these moments of covenant making these attempts to establish peace and boundaries.
It highlights the tension between human brokenness and the desire for order and harmony.
Yeah, and then you have the fear and forgiveness theme.
Right, Jacob's terrified of Esau, but then Esau forgives him.
And even though Rachel's death is this incredibly tragic event, it leads to the birth of Benjamin.
A new beginning in the midst of loss.
So I think this story raises some really big questions.
Yeah, like what?
What does it teach us about the complexities of family relationships?
Right, because these are not simple, straightforward relationships.
They're messy, they're full of conflict and love and everything in between.
And how do we make sense of God's promises in the face of human fallibility?
Yeah, because even though Jacob and his family mess up over and over again, God remains faithful.
It's a reminder that God's grace is bigger than our mistakes.
And what about the consequences of our choices?
Right, both the good and the bad.
Because every decision that Jacob makes ripples out and affects not just him, but his entire family.
And even future generations.
And I think it's interesting to think about the cyclical nature of conflict and reconciliation.
Yeah, like how these patterns repeat themselves.
Because you see it with Jacob and Esau, and then you see it again with Jacob's own sons.
It makes you wonder if we're destined to repeat the mistakes of the past.
So, learner, we're going to leave you with that question.
A question to ponder.
What resonated with you most in this deep dive into Jacob's journey?
What stood out to you?
We'd love to hear your thoughts until next time.
See you in the next deep dive.